for something, I guess, happier, I can say that. Diana teaches a whole course on happiness, a semester-long course. So I expect that you have all done your pre-class reading of Maya Angelou and the Dalai Lama, right? Okay. So we're all good with that. Okay. So we're good. So anyway, very happy to have you back, and let's open with prayer. Gracious and almighty God, we come to you again seeking the continued mysteries of our lives as you, in these troubled times where we are fraught with discord, anger, the inability to even listen to each other. We need to realize that the gifts you give us include happiness, include laughter, and we need to find joy in your world and the knowledge that you always walk with us. We thank Diana this morning for her expertise and squeezing us into her busy life and sharing with us. In Jesus' name, amen.
So I do teach this course about once a year, and it's called Happiness in a Difficult World. And there are lots of ways of thinking about happiness, but I feel like, especially for students lately, they live in a world where it's very insecure for them. They have a lot of anxiety. Many of them are suffering from depression. And they just feel like life is very difficult. And I want them to be inspired. So we read some stories about figures who faced really difficult lives, really painful. And they managed to become exemplary humans, I think. And they managed to teach me a lot about what it takes to not just survive, but thrive in a really difficult environment. So I'm going to take you through just a little bit of this framing of the course, and then I'll try to give you some takeaways from what I learned anyway from these different figures. So let's just start with this idea of happiness. So it seems to me really important to be able to think about what happiness is, what it is for us, what it is for us at different times in our lives, under different situations. I think our understanding of happiness changes with us as we grow older. For example, we might think that happiness is really about having pleasure, and then we realize that there are lots of things that give us pleasure that really aren't good for us and don't allow us to thrive in community with each other. Or we might think that happiness is really about money. I think a lot of students think this. You realize before too long that that can't be right, because money does not buy you happiness, as the old saying goes. So I try to get people at least thinking about what it would mean for them to be happy, and then propose that they ask of these authors that we're reading, what do they think it is, and how do they achieve it? And can I learn anything from their struggle and their success? Okay, so one of my favorite thinkers is Aristotle, and he wrote that if, like archers, we have a target at which to aim, we're more likely to hit the mark. That's a pretty obvious point, really, but it's something we don't often think about. If you've not considered what happiness is, chances are you might stumble upon it, but chances are you'll stumble around. You'll sort of drift aimlessly, say a possibility, if you're not being conscious of it. Now, I'm not talking about setting your sights on one specific thing and going for it as if that's going to make you happy. It's way more rich than that. But it's just keeping the idea of happiness in mind. And so in the course, we move from an idea of happiness into a much fuller concept of well-being or human flourishing. So the idea is, what is it that would allow you, as the unique individual you are, to thrive as a human being? That, I think, is an all-important question. Certainly is for ethics. Okay, now, we all have to work at figuring this out, but sometimes it's only when we confront obstacles that we really start to figure it out. Like when we confront obstacles, we realize, oh, I thought that was going to make me happy, but no, I don't think so. I really learned the hard way. That's not going to make me happy. So what is? But at the initially, the obstacles can be painful. They can be any number of different kinds of things. They can be relatively personal or interpersonal, and they can be broader social, institutional limits that keep us, it feels like they're keeping us from our goal of being happy. So let's just consider a couple of those. So if we think about certain limits that you encounter that make you feel like you're cut off from happiness, some of those are external, at least that's where they start. Could be, you have a situation of terrible conflict in your workplace, for example. That's something that's going to make it hard for you to thrive at work. So that's an obstacle that you have to think about. How do I get through that or around that? There are also, though, internal circumstances. So I'm thinking especially of things like things that happen to your body, like aging and debilitation, illness. But also, and especially in my course, I'm interested in mental and spiritual attitudes that, curiously enough, they seem to be up to us. But we hold on to attitudes that keep us from meeting our goal. And so it's real important, if we are doing that, that we wake up to what some of those are. So here's just a couple of examples. So I think for my view is that a lot of students today suffer from self-preoccupation. So if I'm not a medical person in my lay capacity. I like to think about it as narcissism, but I know it's not a psychiatric condition, but it's just this inability to get out from behind your own eyes and just step into somebody else's world, step behind their eyes and see what they're seeing. It's really curious that some people don't have that as a natural capability. And I also think that there's a lack of curiosity that keeps a lot of people unhappy, because I do, as we'll see, I do believe that people are thriving when they're using their brain and they're being creative and they're surrendering to wonder, okay? But if you have no curiosity, that's really a block. Also, I think many people who are not raised in a religious environment are just, they lack a spiritual awareness. And for me, that could mean any number of different things, because I study multiple religions of the world. But in most of all of those cases, it's just an awareness of something bigger or deeper or higher or transcendent or whatever, basic, foundational, that's ultimately real, and you're trying to figure out how to connect with it. But just to have a sense that there's something greater than yourself that is surrounding you, and you have the option to get in touch with it. I find a lot of students don't have that yet, but there are many. The reason why I like teaching this course is we go over the semester because we deal with the multiple traditions, and most of them are ones that the students aren't familiar with. In a way, it's kind of indirect. They get to wake up to like a Buddhist perspective when maybe they would have sort of resisted, like the one that they grew up with, because that seems so familiar and they think they've already got it. But sometimes when you encounter it in a different guise, then you're like, oh, I guess I hadn't really had a very deep spiritual awareness. Anyway, and emotional intelligence is huge. And what I'm talking about here especially is the ability, while you're feeling an emotion, to recognize that you are, to go ahead and give it a name for the time being, and ask yourself, why am I feeling this? What caused it? is this something that I have any choice about? And the answer is always yes. But many people are driven by their emotions rather than standing back and looking at their emotions and saying, oh, I can see that somebody triggered me. So how do I really want to respond here in a way that allows me to thrive? Someone pushes my button, I can get angry. Am I thriving while I'm angry? I don't know about you, but I'm not. I don't like it. It feels sometimes like I'm powerful, I can fight back or stand up for myself or whatever, but I don't want to stay there. That is not thriving to me. That's letting somebody else, in a way, take me by the neck and drag me around, because they're ticking me off, right? That's controlling my whole mental state. So, no, I don't want that. Okay. Now we do have also these large-scale problems that many of us face that are just so difficult to deal with, and I'm thinking especially about current political dynamics, which are very painful for many of us. Anthropogenic and environmental degradation, widespread hatred and violence, poverty, racism, and then because we look at the Native American tradition called the Lakota tradition. We really have to deal with the pain of Europeans coming in and just slaughtering Native Americans and all the buffalo on which their entire life depended. So, if we know people who are dealing with any of these, then it seems to me we can identify to some extent with the hugeness of the problem and how it's not just an external problem, it becomes an internal problem because we start to get confused about what's right. So we see Christians, for example, arguing for manifest destiny, that it was white people's manifest destiny to take over the North America and South America, and connecting that with the story of the Exodus. So taking on the role of the Hebrew people, feeling that they were enslaved in England, especially because of religious persecution, and so they crossed the Red Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and they come here to Canaan. And yes, there are other people here, but God told God's people to just kill them all. And so we can just come here and do the same thing and with God's blessing. So this is where religion, can sometimes be a help, but it can also be a problem. So we have to think critically about it. Okay, so those are just some ideas of things that I have in the back of my mind. And then the question is, how do you respond to those kind of obstacles? Well, it depends on who you are, where you're situated, what your strengths and weaknesses are, of course, the relationships in which you're embedded, all of that. So there's no one answer. But there are strategies, there are possibilities that are worth considering. So just very briefly, some obstacles that we face, we can just go around them. It's not a big deal. As long as we're thinking. Some of us, I think, hit an obstacle and we keep banging our head against it, and it's like, there's really a simple answer, but no, we want to go this way, right? We want to stay on this path. We want it to go our way. So, no, I'm not going to be flexible. I deserve to go this way. Okay? And then there are some that we try, and it's like, hit the wall. No, that's not going to work. So you could just come back. You should just give up and try again later. But sometimes you just realize you can try multiple times. It's just not gonna work. So then you come back and you just consider another goal. So for me, my example is always organic chemistry. I was gonna go into med school.
Give that one up.
Yeah. I just hit the wall on that. It's like, no way, I could not memorize these formulas. So I realized I'm not going to go into medicine. I'm going to go into philosophy, and then in religious studies. And that turned out to be the right path. But I had to let go of the other attachments. And then sometimes, like with bigger structural issues, we really have to gather together, organize, and beat it down, and it's very, very difficult. Sometimes we make a great deal of progress, and then there's a regression to an earlier state, and we make a great deal of progress, and then there's, backlash. But I'm thinking here especially of like racism and sexism, just the kinds of structural evils that make it difficult for a huge number of people to thrive, and by almost seems like by design. Just carefully set up structures. But the one that, the possibility that I think is most promising for a lot of obstacles is that you don't just react to the obstacle. I mean, you really stop and consider it, and you think about what exactly it is, how exactly it's confining you. Do you have a reason to stay on path? If you do, can you work through the obstacle and get to the other side? So, multiple possibilities, and I think that you try different and this is what practical wisdom is, right? You're constantly coming up against limits, and you try different things, and you find out that some things work really well for you, other things really don't, and you learn them from experience. Okay, so now I want to say, as with my example with colonialism in North America, that religions can diminish the quality of people's lives and stymie their personal and social development. Religions can condition people to be governed by fear and defensiveness rather than curiosity and love. They can create strong impressions that unjust forms of domination and abuse are divinely ordained, and that certain people matter more than others. Okay? I take this to be evil, right? That evil is defined as an absence of good, and what the good is thriving. Thriving of the entire creation and the return of the whole of creation to its source. And human beings have a huge role to play in that, and anytime you put them into conditions where they don't realize that that's their role, to love one another and to love God, then the religion, whatever it is not doing what I think it should be doing. And multiple religions, that they all ideally aim at the same thing. It's just that religions are social institutions that sometimes don't live up to their own ideals. Okay. On the other hand, of course, as you know, because this is a great religious community, I really like it. Religions can also provide paradigmatic figures, teachings, symbols, practices that help people realize greater personal, social, and spiritual well-being. So religions are always a mixed bag, and you could have a religious community where some people are thriving and other people are really not. And so it's not like a all or nothing, but just different people's ways of whether they're opening up to possibilities of loving God and neighbor or closing down for whatever reason. And religions can provide resources for identifying and dealing with obstacles and addressing them constructively. Okay? So we have happiness as a goal. We're constantly running into obstacles. Religion is one way of learning how to deal with those obstacles. Can you get around them? Must you just surrender to them? Will somebody help you if you surrender to them? What amount do you need to do for yourself? What do you let somebody or a deity do for you? All those questions. The whole of the Christian religion anyway is all about trying to provide answers for those kinds of questions so that they can help people become more fully human and live a richer spiritual life. So, what I do in this course is comparative study of religion and ethics. And what I love about this area of study is just that it allows us to view religion, religious moral systems with a lot more clarity. I'm amazed at how little the people in my classes know about any religions other than their own. And many of them have no religious background, that too. But they know very little. And so they're very susceptible to media messaging that teaches them incorrectly about various religions around the world and primes them to be afraid of them or judgmental toward them. And I'm usually all about trying to just bring that to their awareness and then actually give them correct information. And then we can get to the point of realizing that, yeah, there might be some members of that tradition who act that way, and I don't blame you for being afraid of them. But that's not the tradition. That's not the best of it. That's, I don't know the word I want. So, I think that also when you study traditions other than your own, you don't know what the kind of blind spots of your tradition are. You've just grown up into that, and that's your world, and all the questions and answers all align, and they form a good picture. There's stuff that we don't fully understand, but there's a good deal to hang on to rely on. But part of what that means is that you very rarely step outside that whole frame and into a different frame, and you start to see how the nature of reality, what's possible for humans, everything is organized in a different way. There might be commonalities across tradition, but there's some fundamental differences. But you wouldn't know that if you hadn't stepped outside of your own view to consider another one. And I find that when people have the opportunity to do that, then they're able to come back to their own traditions with much more awareness and creativity. They can work with symbols a little bit better than simply reciting formula, for example. Okay, and my goal is really this, just helping people. I have to, I can't say this out loud on film. Because I work at a public university, I'm not supposed to be doing this. But no,
Sanctuary.
Yeah, thank you. I really want people to kind of wake up to their spiritual dimension, because I think that that is critical for almost everybody to thrive, but that a lot of people just don't know that. They don't know what it is. And so that's why I feel like if they can see it at work in somebody else's life, and they can see the power of it and the freedom that comes with it, then that will be attractive enough for them to start asking their own questions. That would be ideal. Okay. We will discuss very shortly. So I just wanted to signal, these are the different texts that we read, but these are the different traditions that are represented in these texts, and every one of these is a mixture of things, a mixture of indigenous religions and various versions of their own tradition, and mixing and combining and struggling against each other. That's part of the fun of the study of religion. But let me tell you what the themes are that I've come to appreciate from these authors. And this Black Elk Speaks was not written by Black Elk. It was written by John Neihart on the basis of interviews that he did with Black Elk through a very long, drawn-out process of translation and retranslation. So I can't say that Black Elk is the person who's giving us his story in that particular case. Okay, so some themes that I see them saying is that to be happy, seek the truth of life. and discover it more in surrendering to the questions and in grasping for final answers. That's kind of a hard one. There's something really enlivening and exciting about that surrender to wonder. And some people don't like to ask questions that don't have easy answers. That's frustrating because I want an answer. But no, that's the spiritual life is more about letting the questions come and pursuing them as far as they'll take you, and then conceiving new questions and pursuing them, and just relaxing about that because you're up against a mystery. You're never going to be able to put that into words, but you can kind of approach it through questioning and exploring. And then I think it's really important for them, these figures, and their happiness to feel their connection to the mysterious ground of existence and be grateful for it. This is something that especially comes through in Native American traditions and in Tibetan Buddhism, that you are fundamentally connected to everything else that exists. It all has its ground in God or mind or whatever you want to characterize that transcendent thing as. And so a lot of people feel kind of isolated or lonely, and I try to show students that you can't, you have the capacity to go outside and sit under one of those trees and just awaken to its energy. Just think about the energy flowing in the water and look at the sun hitting the leaves and how translucent they are. You are not alone, okay? And if you can do that in any situation in life and just feel that connection, that can be helpful for a lot of people feeling happier. And then look to connect with spirit all around you. So not only in trees, but in people you might not expect to find it, in communities like this. But also, a lot of people find spirit in creative acts. I know a lot of writers for whom writing is a spiritual act. They get in contact with a kind of energy that takes them outside of themselves, and it allows them to feel just like they're on top of the world in a way that leaves them more open to people and possibilities. And then what we learn, especially from African American women, is that many of them they're taught originally to find spirit in the heavens, in a kind of abstract deity, but many they call themselves womanists, black feminists of faith, many rediscover that God is the strength of my life. God is the power of being, what allows me to get out of bed in the morning, what gives me direction, a sense of purpose. That's what God is, and that you find in yourself and in your community when people are all helping each other to enjoy their lives. And again, recognize your interdependence with everything else. So this is not just like you're connected to everything, but it means that we need to do, I think more about how in every moment of our lives we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the things that just happened 2 seconds ago, which wouldn't have happened if there hadn't been things an hour ago that happened, and if you just think all the way back to the beginning of your life, and all the people who've contributed to making you who you are, and including all the food that you've eaten, and all the people who grew that food and transported it and packaged it, put it in the store, your parents, it's just incredible to think about how much we depend on each other. And I think that that also means then that I have a responsibility to make sure that whatever I put out there, whatever I say, whatever I do, is likely to improve the conditions of life for everybody. This is a saying from Thich Nhat Hanh, which is that we really do inter-exist. We don't exist as separate beings who have to try to find a connection with each other. We're already flowing kind of inside and out of each other, and the causes that affect you might not affect me, and vice versa, and it's all very dynamic. And I find that that can be helpful, especially, yeah. So I want to know, these are some themes here, but I want to know what you think. How would you characterize the meaning of happiness? And if you want, also, what do you find to be one of the biggest challenges in realizing that kind of goal? So, yeah.
For me, excuse me.
Myrna, you make me happy.
Thank you. For me, it's getting over myself. That's the biggest thing I will have to work on, because that says it all. I just don't need to put myself into every situation. I need to think of what's around me. And you're doing a wonderful job.
That's terrific. Thank you.
I think one of the things that many of us struggle with is when there's sorrow or other challenging emotions in life, I think we're sometimes subliminally taught that that's the opposite of happiness, to have to go through those things, and that if you just did things right, you could be happy all the time, versus maybe having that sense that to experience something deeply sorrowful because somebody was really important to you and brought you a lot of joy, and now you're missing that, is part and parcel of sort of understanding the truth of life. So I think that's something that we often wrestle with, and just allowing ourselves to be in whatever feeling that we have with the people that we're with, but not stay there or worry about it or get too hung up on, but maybe think why and how. That's something that comes to mind when I think about and I like to think about joy, because we can be joyful even when we're also maybe sorrowful or angry or whatever.
Yeah. I especially think of joy as kind of freedom and expansiveness, right? So as long as you're attached to your emotional state, you're closed in on yourself, right? So just letting that go. There are lots of techniques for that.
You use the word thrive a lot, and that really resonated with me. And that to me is a happiness. That I think pediatricians use that a lot with newborns. Are they thriving? Are they thriving? Are they fulfilling what they were given at birth and that sort of thing?
This whole thing has made a change in my life. I had a teacher that we were going on a trip together with a group, and I was the only brown person there. And we stopped to have lunch, and everybody got served except the table where I was sitting. And so the teacher asked why our table wasn't waited on, and they said, "We don't serve her." And she said, "If you don't serve her, you don't serve any of us." And I was sort of embarrassed at that. And I told the teacher, "Oh no, that's fine. I can take my lunch to the bus." Done that many a time. But she said, "Oh no, you're one of us. And you should be eating with us just like that." And so we all got up and left. She got everybody up and left. And going down the road, I was just thinking, should I say something or should I not say something? And I got it in my head that this has made my life, it gives me the strength to know that I am a person and I can do the things that everybody else does. And to this day, I have gone to the top of some international conventions because I had the strength. I was the person, and I was just like anybody else. Where I live, I'm the only brown person living there in the whole place. And everybody has treated me just like I am a person, and it makes me feel good that I know that I can do the things that everybody else does. And it was a teacher that gave me, and God that gave me the strength to do those things. So that's what, and this is just hitting on my life completely. I'm really impressed with this.
The sadness and suffering, sorrow is deeply bound up with thriving, because one of the key elements of human happiness for all of these figures is that joyfulness, that freedom from obstacles that we sometimes imposed by our own minds, but also because we have a society around us that's not looking for us to do very well. They're not looking for us to be happy. They're more concerned about their own happiness. But when you suffer, you don't want to be there at the time, but I know from a life of considerable suffering that it made me who I am. It made me a more compassionate person. And compassion is a central element of a good life, because it makes you feel like you are alive, you are connected, you matter, they matter, you are not alone, we all suffer. And I think part of the Christian message, that God is with us in our suffering, that's a really powerful message that allows you to find something different, a different quality of that suffering, rather than simply I don't know how to put it, but the difference. Here's my example. So, birthing a baby, I had great coaches, and so I felt like I was, and I had no anesthesia, so I felt like, oh, this is so incredibly painful. But they taught me how to turn that pain into power. And all of a sudden, I had, a totally different experience. Like, yeah, it was painful, but it was the most powerful thing I ever did. So much of it is your own attitude toward what's happening.
I'm always impressed. I had an older brother who was a type A, very, very talented person, became an alcoholic, suffered from MS, and he was this type A personality, essentially bedridden. I don't think he ever had an unhappy day in his life. He maintained that happiness. And in those circumstances, we can be happy under any circumstances.
Yeah.
I was wondering about a worst case scenario. Take someone who has been burdened by being marginalized and doesn't have a personality that's exuberant, doesn't have an education that's explored, curiosity, has had multiple deep adverse childhood experiences and is burdened by that, and maybe even a disease state that's chronic and debilitating. How can they find happiness using some of the things you talked about?
Yeah, it has to start with one-on-one with somebody in their life who's willing to see them for who they are and just accept their life and communicate the importance of their life. This is where we're interdependent. We can't get out of a situation like that on our own. It has to be through community. And that's where we then can say, okay, I can see a child in that situation. I know I have to be that community because I could make a difference simply by giving affirmation. But it's hard, but I think it's even more hard when we're dealing with psychiatric conditions, because those really are, for some of us, brain limits. Some of us have access to treatment, and some of us have access to counseling as well. And some people don't. And some people have complications on top of that, as you know, like homelessness and such, and alienation from the community. That's where I think our compassion has to lead us to do something constructive to ease their suffering. Maybe it's to smile at them, greet them, or organize an effort to, fund the homeless shelter or whatever, something. But yeah, we live in a difficult world. I'm not going to say that we don't, or that we should all be happy all the time. It should be real.
I think an example of my ingenuity and going through the African American experience and writing that beautiful poetry.
Yeah.
That's got to be an answer.
Yeah.
Another thing that comes to mind, especially if I haven't read all of these works, but especially Maya Angelou's book, is one of the things she was big on was not letting others define what you have to be happy. So she didn't say, others don't control my happiness. It's you're not in charge of me being happy. You can do these horrible things to me, but I can still choose to find ways to be happy in my day, in my life. So that's another thing I think about is, we live in a world that doesn't always want you to be happy. They want you to be happy if you buy the next thing or you get the next achievement in your life, but you can't let others control that for you.
That's right. But she had to become a person who figured that out.
Yeah.
And so she had an amazing community. And so this idea of finding empowerment for her, it was in her relationships with Black women. Her teacher, her mother, her grandmother, they had a relationship with her that gave her, and her teacher, Mrs. Flowers, gave her the courage to speak and find her unique voice. And then she was able over time to realize she was really good at it. And then her gift to humanity was going to be to do something she's really good at in a way that inspires other people. I mean, amazing. Now, she's not a perfect person. None of these are. We all have flaws. But if somebody gets it even partly right for a while, I think that's worth celebrating. Anyone else? Just any thoughts?
I saw you move.
I did, because of that notion that you just shared about someone getting it right for part of the time, which I feel like in our current society, especially with young people out still work at the university, is absolutely counter to how we behave. You mess up, you are dead to us forever, right? I taught a class a few years ago with graduate students, and there were like a few philosophers or thinkers that they would say, well, this person said this, but we also know that this person used to be really mean to his spouse, and so we'll just throw them out with the bathwater. And I was like, can we do that? Is that
interesting?
How does that fuel either happiness or unhappiness, estrangement, all these different pieces, right?
Yeah.
Another piece that I was thinking about as I look at this, the notion of being able to define happiness, I'm really kind of stuck on it. And that word isn't one that I'm able to define, but I remember being a young person, and when I thought about my life, I used to think that I wanted to be a generous person. And then people would ask me, well, what does that mean to you? And I would say, having enough that I can give to others. And I look back at the life that Virginia and I have made, and if we got some extra bucks and we can buy all the kids in second grade glasses to watch the eclipse, we want to do that. If we can get flowers for their fancy day, we want to do that, right? And so, I don't know that I've been or led the most successful life, but I think we've hit that mark together, and it's been fun to be on a journey with somebody who also values that.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Friendship is one of the most important features of a good life. To have friends who are good and good for you. That they're honest with you. To me, a friendship is almost like a mirror where you see the best in the other person, and then you can say, oh, I'd like to aspire to have that kind of goodness. And then you can also see when you're doing something that isn't good for them, you can see it in their face, and then you go back and you think, I need to change my attitude a little bit, But that kind of love and friendship is critical, I think. But there are a lot of us who don't have those close relationships, or have them and then lose them. So that's where I think a lot of this is just bearing up under suffering. sometimes. Maybe that's the best we can do. Let's just hope that it will pass. And as soon as you say that, as soon as you do that, it actually will come back sooner because you've surrendered instead of trying to control it.
So I was, two things. The serenity prayer was the first thing that I was thinking about, was that we really need some wisdom, I think, to help people understand that you learn what you can control and what you can't control. But the second thing I was just thinking about was the kids with their iPhones and mass media and how that's influencing them when you were talking about friendships, because I think that's really interfered with a lot of friendships. Can you give some insight on what you're seeing in the college community? Those of you who are in it can probably really tell us a lot about that.
Yeah, what I'm seeing is an epidemic of loneliness at a time where they're more connected than ever before. You know, we thought that being able to have email and all this other stuff I don't use, the picture one, whatever, that it would just make everyone feel connected, but it makes them feel very lonely, very cut off. And so the children that I know who are flourishing are the ones who still go out and play outside with friends, and they have their struggles, and they learn how to resolve conflicts, and they're doing all these things in a way that's face to face and body to body. I think it's very difficult with the other stuff, and that's where, at a certain point, parents just have to limit screen time and make their kids do something else, whether they like it or not.
I sort of had a question for you, because you deal with students so much, and the thing that you have noticed, that there's a lot of self-preoccupation with ourselves, and I just wondered if you had seen that also.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but
And do you think that technology helps?
Oh, technology absolutely does. We're doing a common read in my office right now about the anxious generation, which talks about that. I know you all met to talk about future adult ed. Let's do some talking about wait till 8th and how it's better developmentally for young people to not have access to smartphones and technology until they're in 8th grade or beyond. And maybe get folks here to sign on to a pledge so that our kids aren't the only ones that aren't having the phones. Okay. But also, I don't want us to act as if young people are the only ones that are preoccupied in those ways. It's us too. When we lived in Madison, we made like a dear group of friends, and the very simple way that they became a dear group of friends, we decided that we're going to do trivia together. And at trivia, you can't use your phone. And so we would go to dinner every week for 2 hours, and we couldn't use our phones. And so we just talked and got to know each other. And we did that for years. And those people, many of them stood up with us at our wedding. We actually met up and did trivia the week before our wedding as like our kind of bachelorette parties with each other, because we developed those close friendships because it was hours without our phones, which is unheard of now for us. And so I think, phones and technology, I think it preoccupies not only young people, but also us. I think it's rewired their brain chemistry. I think it's trying to rewire our brain chemistry, and I think we should and can't resist it.
And yet the thing that stood out to me is that I think about all of the young people, and not just young people, I think about adults, the ways in which we are able to stay connected through technology, and about how that can bring us joy. The amount of times that Angela will come to me and say, hey, did you see that X person, celebrated a birth, or got a milestone, or got tenure? Like, we are so excited on their behalf, and if we didn't have that, we wouldn't know that information. Right. I mean, that's how we learned Katie Herman had her baby, for those of you that are connected to that pitch, right? And I think that I don't want to say that technology is the total downfall of all of it. Like we can't blame it all on that. And so I think the question is, with this, how do we still reach out and recognize their humanity and say, I saw this and I'm so excited for you? You know, I think to me that's helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. My son lives in Korea, and I have a grandbaby there too. So we get to use technology to talk every week. And they send me pictures of him from daycare and everything every morning. So I feel like, it's been a year, but it doesn't feel that long at all.
And when you see that baby, the baby will know who you are.
Exactly.
Right? We
Yeah,
talk
it's
to my parents
amazing.
every Sunday evening. They live away, but they know who their grandparents are inside and out because they see them weekly.
Yeah, I think the problem is when technology becomes an addiction. We just can't put it down. And so it takes some practice doing that.
And I think there's a lot of pressure on that technology produces on the students too, and all of us to look a certain way or to achieve a certain thing that's often fantasized by the technology or manipulated in a way that makes it unrealistic. Another example I have was there was must have been on TikTok, I'm not sure, but a trend where they were saying like a particular career path was easy money and didn't have to go to school very long, and it was just amazing to see like at the university the numbers of applicants quintupled or more like tenfold increased. So the amazing power of the media to influence the way you think about things, and just even that awareness of like, okay, I'm being manipulated in this way to take this certain action, and showing that it does show up in the real world and ways people respond to that. So just even that awareness, like, oh, when I'm looking at this stuff, like they are trying to manipulate me to take an action, to buy something, to stay on the app longer, to do these things, and that kind of manipulation is something you have to be able to turn off because it's so easy to fall into that.
Yeah, for sure.
It was ultrasound tech radiology. Their applications went up by like 10 times what they had 2 years prior, because it was this easy career to make easy money, and now it was like on this whole thing on TikTok and other social media platforms, and their applications just went, they're like, we have 20 seats and we have 500 applicants.
Okay, you two can join a bell choir. Okay, you're captive for a while without any technology, and you suffer with these people standing next to you for a common goal, and they become really good friends, and you know them really well. That's one of the best things for me here, knowing the kids better, and knowing the people I've stood by in bell choir and suffered with them, and the people that I have in South Dakota, okay? Because when something exciting happened, the first words out of my mouth are, how am I going to tell everybody that Jeremy and Sarah are engaged? How am I going to tell them that Jeremy and Sarah are going to have a baby? How am I going to do that? This is my family. Now, I assume you can find other ways like teams and stuff like that. Okay, book clubs. Join something that matters to you, that is working for something. Yeah, I know. And see, I know Helen from Bell Choir and Margaret. I know these people I wouldn't have known before, okay? Because we suffer together.
Yes. We learn to share, Helen Bells, that's hard.
Oh, yeah.
You have to pass it to me.
So this is Helen. I'm going to say that for me, part of that interdependence and interexistence of bells is that it is a space in which it is okay to make mistakes. And that to me is the power. I find that I'm obviously not from America, and I find the culture here is very, very focused on status and perceived successes. It's very focused on your position and your job and your influence. And so I absolutely love being in a group of people where you can make mistakes, and yes, they will go, oh, but that is absolutely vital to happiness, that you can make mistakes and you're not just the sum of your job or your relations or all of these other things. Off my soapbox.
Amen.
Yeah, and just think a lot about self-acceptance. So we're I know I'm not in the Lutheran church, but we're all sinners, right?
Oh, we sin here.
You sin?
I sin a lot with bells.
Yeah. And it can be a serious matter, you know? But there, I think one of the, can I have one more here maybe?
Yeah.
That's Maya Angelou. Well, this is the one. Keep your sense of humor. And that's a hard thing to do, because you don't want to not take your sin seriously, because you should be trying to address it and improve the quality of your life and your relationship with God and others. But at the same time, if that becomes an obsession for you, you close yourself off from all sources of that light and love that really needs to be coming from you in order for you to improve your life. So, yeah, I think, when I just think about, I laugh a lot, and I have a really loud laugh, and I sometimes have to cover my mouth because it hurts people's ears. And, but I just realized when I, have that, like a belly laugh, that just relax so much. And then I can hear what people are saying, or I can turn my attention elsewhere instead of on that problem that I've been wrestling with all day. It seems so simple. I know many of you are medical professionals, and there's just a lot of research on this with people who are have cancer, they're going through cancer treatments, and really spend time watching comedy and that sort of thing. It's just really good for the soul as well as the body.
Thank you.
You always get the last question.
Well, but thank you.
That was wonderful. I think I've noticed we really connected with what you were saying, so very much appreciate that and giving us your time.